Thank you so much for coming back each week to improve the quality of your life by improving the quality of your thoughts. Hi, my name is Sham. I go by Shambo, and I'm your host. Welcome to the Brighter Mindset Podcast. I want to thank the hundreds of you that have been listening, reviewing, rating the podcast, watching on YouTube, going to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen. Thank you so much for taking your time, your valuable time, and trusting me with it. Thank you for being here. Before we keep going, I want to give a shout out to 3 countries. First one being Ireland. Ireland. By the way, there's people in Ireland listening to this podcast. So freaking cool. Hello. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. By the way, did you know, fun fact about Ireland, that's where Halloween came from. It's an old Celtic festival. It's tied to an old Celtic festival. And we got some people in Japan listening to this podcast. Hello, everyone. I really, really want to come to your country for sure. I want to go to Ireland too, but I want to climb Mount Fuji really badly. So that is one of my deep desires. I've always wanted to do that. It is a dream of mine. And we got a bunch of listeners in the United Kingdom, Great Britain. I visited Stratford upon Avon. I think I pronounced that right. It is in the middle of the country in Great Britain, and it's a part of the country that I was completely blown away by. I fell in love with it. And fun fact, that's actually the birthplace of William Shakespeare. Okay, so if you're listening to this is episode 002. This is part 2 in a series. So if you want to, and you really want to get this entire experience, go back to episode 000, start from the top because they build on each other. At least for this series, the next set of a few podcasts, they are building on each other to be able to help drive home a really beautiful message, something that has changed my life. It's given me the ability to lead with love in more instances than any other emotion. And I want to gift that to everybody else. I want everyone to be able to have the opportunity to think and feel and live that way, because why not? It's absolutely beautiful. So today we're going to continue the deep dive, and it's something that I like to call the most important pillar of our own happiness. It is one of the most important lessons we're not taught in school, and it's one of the most important topics that I could discuss. It's actually the foundational topic to any other topic that I'll ever cover on this podcast. Why are we even discussing this topic? You can find that out by listening to the first episode, which is 001, and go through the backstory and explain why we're discussing seeing the good in other people and why that, I believe, is one of the most important foundational thoughts that we can carry with us in everything that we do. So last week, we finished discussing how a solid foundation for a happy life, our happy life, is determined by our mindset. It's not determined by the things that come to us, not the circumstances, not external people or things. It actually stems from our mindset. We talked about why that was so important. And then we dug into why seeing the good in others is the most foundational practice that we can imbibe. We ended with a actual scenario that took place between a gentleman named Dr. Shah and my late guru, Pramukh Swami, the person who has inspired me to do everything that I'm doing. This podcast wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for him. I wouldn't be the person I am if it wasn't for everything that he has taught me and guided me and held my hand and helped me up in moments of despair, in moments of loneliness, in moments of just pain. And I am fully indebted to everything that he has done for me. So this podcast is a way for me to be able to give back and do what he did. And that's to help people and help people be able to live a life that's beautiful. And the conversation was this. Dr. Shah was identifying a few flaws or mistakes that certain people were making. And Pramukh Swami turns to him and says, look, if you want to be happy, if that person has 99 flaws, if that person has 99 mistakes that they have made, if you want to be happy, it is your responsibility to seek and find and focus on at least one good thing about them. We have to find that one good. That's what he was trying to say. First and foremost, though, before I go any further, I want to be able to highlight a few thoughts. First, if we are not right now, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you've been through, wherever has led you to the point that you are at right now, just like me, whatever has brought me to where I am right now, those thoughts, those experiences, the people, the things I've witnessed, the things I've heard, everything that has brought me here has helped me develop the perspectives that I have. If I am unwilling to even admit that there could be another way of looking at this, there could be another perspective, then this entire conversation or anything that we do in our entire life, we are not setting ourselves up to actually grow and actually learn. We have to be willing to assume that there could be a drastically different way, a different opinion, different perspective than ours that could be true, could be better, could be more useful, more effective than whatever it is that I have decided in my mind. And if we're not open to considering that, we're just hurting ourselves. So I'm going to share knowledge that I have learned and I have tried to imbibe in my life. I made that promise in episode 000 that I'm only going to share things that I have had time to genuinely introspect over and try to apply. But I'm going to share that usually through stories. And I do it through stories because that's the best way I've learned. And I think that's the best way humanity has learned and shared for thousands of years, from fables to actual history. The best way to communicate a message. If you look in marketing right now, you know, if you have a good story, you can sell almost anything. So when it comes to connecting for all of us, I think a story is the best way to do it. I remember I was reading a book by Ryan Holiday. I don't know if you've heard his name, but I recommend you write it down and look up any book that he has written. I stand by them just because they are phenomenal. They're really put out there to help each of us become better versions of ourselves, type of stuff that I love. So Ryan Holiday wrote a book called Courage is Calling. And at the start of the book, before the chapter even starts, he starts discussing how Hercules had come across a crossroads, where on either side of the crossroads, there was a goddess standing there. And one said, if you come with me, your life will be super easy. You'll get every temptation you can ever think about. You'll have everything come to you very easily. Then the second goddess said, if you come with me, you're going to have to work hard. You only reap the results of things that you have put a lot of effort into, and you will have to sacrifice and you'll have to have courage on this path. But before he disclosed which path Hercules chose, he posed a question, which is probably something that some of us might be thinking right now. Hey, the story with Hercules, that's a legend. Did the story even happen? Does it even matter? What does it have to do with me? And he passionately said, yes, it does matter, because it is a story about us. It's a story about our dilemma. It's a story about our own crossroads. When you hear stories, what ends up happening is it allows us to remove ourselves from our current situation and see our dilemma in another individual. What happens when you do that is you drop your guard. You stop being defensive and you think, hey, maybe I could learn something from this. Because it's not directly about us and it's through somebody else's perspective, what we're able to do while listening to these stories is pause and think. Through stories, in a moment of reflection, while connecting with somebody in that story or a lesson that's given in that story, we're able to look at our own life and assess where and how can we relate to it? How can this help me? And most of the time, if we come with an attitude to want to learn and grow, we can relate easily. But other times, we can just be defensive and learn absolutely nothing, and it does nothing but actually strengthen our arrogance. So it's up to us. When we go into a new situation, when we go to listen to something that's challenging us, to break a pattern of thinking, we have to go into it with the perspective, if we really want to grow and learn from it, that maybe there's something in here for me. And what you do is you take the best from it and you leave the rest. You take what you can apply, what makes sense to you, and you leave the rest. But going in with that open perspective is paramount. There's an example of why this is so important. There was this minister, a part of this big, vast kingdom. He was going to every part of the kingdom and just seeing what was there, who was living there, and just observing and taking note. So he ends up taking a very long train ride. Then he takes a car ride, goes really far. Then he gets onto a boat and goes even further on the boat. And he gets to this small little remote island in the nation. And he gets there and he ends up meeting with one of the locals. And he turns to her and says, "Wow, you're very remote here, aren't you?" And she turns back to him and says, "Huh? Remote? Remote from what?" And the minister's looking at her. It's like she doesn't understand how remote of a part of the nation that she is living in. But for her, remote from what? From his perspective, it was remote. From her perspective, it was home. Everyone has these different opinions. Everyone's got these different views and these different ways of looking at things and life. The life that we have is a result of the habits, the choices, and the mindset that we have. And so if we're not completely happy, maybe we can look beyond our situation and trust the words of somebody else who may have what we want and try to figure out, how can I learn from that? How can I imbibe that? That reminds me of a story about a frog. It's like a fourth generation frog that was born inside of a well. So this fourth generation frog was born inside of this well, had never seen anything outside this well because the wall was too big, the water was a bit low, and it lived there, family thrived there, everything it knew was in the well. And one day, out of the blue, the first time ever, he ends up seeing something sitting on the edge of the well wall. It was a bird. And so the bird starts talking to him. It's like, "Hey, how you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm doing great. How are you? Where'd you come from? What are you?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a bird." The bird tried to explain to the frog what he was and what he was doing. And then the bird asks him, it's like, "Hey, have you ever been outside of this well?" And the frog says, "Why would I ever go outside this well? There's nothing else outside this well. This is everything." He's like, "No, there's a vast ocean that you've never seen that you would love." He said, "What's an ocean?" And then he's like, "Oh, well, it's this big body of water." And he says, "Oh, is the ocean like this big?" Then the frog basically makes a little circle inside the center of the well and says, "Is the ocean this big?" It's like, "No, silly. The ocean's way bigger than that." Then the frog makes an even bigger circle, about 75% of the well, and says, "Is the ocean this big? Because this is huge." And the bird says, "No, the ocean is even bigger, so much bigger than you can ever imagine." Then the frog makes a final lap, hugging the wall of the well, and looks up to the bird and says, "Is the ocean this big?" And the bird says, "No, it's thousands of times bigger than this." And the frog looks at the bird and says, "You're crazy. Get out of here. There's nothing that exists that's bigger than this well." Why? Because to the frog, that was the only thing it knew. That was its only reality. But for the bird knew the well was just a small hole on this massive rock that had an unbelievable amount of water. But the frog was unable to let go of his own opinion and wasn't able to actually see that there could be something so much bigger, because that's all he knew. This is something that actually happens to us. What we end up doing is we discount ideas if they're completely different from anything that we could imagine. If it's something that seems impractical to us, we don't even consider it. That's a very shallow way of living life. And it actually limits us from learning, from growing, from doing so much more for our own joy, and maybe even for other people. So that's something that we should definitely consider. The two stories, the minister and the frog, helps us realize that keeping an open mind is absolutely essential. We're going to keep an open mind. We got this. We can do it. That's how I had to do it. And that's how I try to do it, how I try to continuously do it. I keep an open mind. I don't judge an idea just because it's different from something. It's challenging me, or it's, forcing me to be honest with myself. So take what serves you, leave the rest. Whoa, what is this? Is this the first ad on the Brighter Mindset podcast? Yeah, you're right, it is. And guess what the ad's from? The ad is from a company that my wife and I started. Oh, what are the chances that that would happen? All right, so this is the Brighter Mindset Publishing Company, and well, if you know a kid and you know a toddler or you know a preteen or you know a teenager, this announcement's for you because the books my wife and I are publishing are there to help children learn in a very lighthearted way real life concepts such as emotional intelligence, effective communication, and virtues and values to live by. And to be honest, we wanted that for our son, who is 2.5 years old, and we decided to start writing them and realized that there's probably a lot of other people out there that would love this. And something really cool, we've done 2 children's books already. They're both on Amazon. Just search Soni Patel at Amazon.com. SONIPATEL. A cool announcement: in the next couple of days after this podcast is released, we will be publishing our first ever chapter book directed towards young girls. And this book is phenomenal. It is teaching these young girls to be able to value who they are at the core and not value themselves only because of outside validation, but it's done in a beautifully creative way. I'm so proud of what my wife has put together, and I really hope you or someone you love benefits from these books. All right, let's get back to your regularly scheduled programming. So what were we discussing? Yes, 99 mistakes, 99 flaws. It's our responsibility to find, for our own happiness, at least one good thing about that person, right? That makes sense, doesn't it? Well, what I typically hear from people all the time is that thinking this way, trying to find the good in somebody, is totally impractical. It doesn't make sense. Why would you ever want to do that? Like, why dig and try to find something about somebody that is good when it's so much easier to just see and tell that, hey, this person is just a crappy person? To be honest, I don't actually think that is impractical. At first, early in my practice, a decade ago, maybe 2 decades ago, actually 2 decades ago, I did think it was impractical. I did think it didn't make sense. But what I have come to realize is the mindset that's going to make me feel anger, the mindset that's going to make me develop a grudge, the mindset that's going to make me hate somebody, the mindset that's going to cause me to judge someone, when it's going to do what you see happens in politics all the time, where you passionately pick one side and then you hate the other party. You hate anyone that thinks something different from you. That in my mind is incredibly impractical. That is such a horrible way to go about living life. You know, if you were to pass away in the moment of you feeling absolute hatred towards somebody that you've never met before, what does that say about us? What if we were going to go through something and they were going to take a snapshot of that moment of our life and just showing how we were so disgusted by something we can't control, someone we can't control, and we were so passionately and just livid just thinking about that person? Think about that. What does that say about us? It shows that we actually have very, very little control over our life. You know, the reason why we might find it to be impractical to see the good is because of something the psychologists call a confirmation bias. And I'm going to give you a few examples of what a confirmation bias is. I want to read to you exactly what it is. It is the tendency to seek out information. This is individuals, okay? One person has a confirmation bias, and this is what it is. It's the tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs. And at the same time, it gets us to ignore or discount information that contradicts our beliefs. A confirmation bias, can lead us to make very poor decisions where we think we're making a very intelligent one, but we're making one without actually considering all the other factual information that's out there. So let me give you a simple example. Imagine your favorite sports team and you're watching the final championship game with your favorite sports team. You will only see your sports team doing everything right. And even when you're listening to news, you're looking up reports, you're hearing about statistics of your team, When you hear somebody criticize your team, criticize your player, how does it make you feel? That person doesn't know anything. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know how good this person is. Oh, blah, 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 blah. We get extremely defensive about a team, players, people that we have nothing to do with, but we consider that to be our favorite team. So now imagine you're watching a replay of a very close call that the referees made. And one side can be like, oh, wow, that's a fumble. Like if you're playing football, or hey, that was a penalty in soccer or football. In the rest of the world, Americans call it soccer. And you see that, hey, that was definitely a penalty. But the other team's fans sitting in the same room looking at the same thing saying, no, that's not a penalty. That's wrong. That was a bad call. That was a bad call. Even though the facts are right there in front of them. Our confirmation bias doesn't allow us to even consider it. And instead, as a fan of your team, you're going to stand by them even if it doesn't make sense. Second example, elections are around the corner. I don't like talking about politics, and I'm not bringing this up to talk about politics. I'm bringing it from the perspective of if we commit to one political agenda or we commit to one politician, what we're going to do is we're only going to seek to read, hear about, and listen to or watch news about that candidate that's favorable. Anywhere where someone's going to be criticizing that candidate, we're not even going to want to watch it. We're not even going to want to listen to it or even consider it. And what we're going to call it immediately is fake news or it's false information. And the reality is it could actually be factual. But because we have picked a side, our confirmation bias is going to prevent us from even considering it. The last example is something that happens to us all the time. At least it happens to me all the time. Imagine you lost your keys. Okay, very simple. You're looking for your keys for your car, your motorcycle, whatever it might be, your house. And you know you left it in the kitchen, but you just look through the kitchen and you're like, there's no way that the keys are here. I just looked. There's no keys. The keys aren't in the kitchen. No matter what I do, I looked everywhere. Keys aren't here. And you tell someone in your family, hey, I can't find the keys. I can't find them anywhere. I know I left them in the kitchen, but they're not here. Someone took them. Where'd you guys move it to? And then your family member or somebody, your friend, walks in and says, yo, they're right there next to the stove, man. They're sitting right on the counter. How many times has something like that happened to you? It's happened to me all the time. In that moment, we believe that something is not there. We've looked and we've looked hard enough and we've looked thoroughly enough, and it's not there anymore, even if it's in plain sight, and your brain doesn't want to seem dumb. So it does this thing where it tries to conform to whatever you believe. And that leads me to this next thing. So think about that. Confirmation bias can, even if something's in front of you, you won't see it. If you think something about someone, you won't believe the other thing. You won't even pay attention to it. And if you're seeing actual facts of a foul that is against your team, you'll still see it a different way, even though it is clear as day and night. That's what a confirmation bias can do, and it happens to us all the time. Tony Robbins is somebody whose seminars I've taken part in, and he is someone who has taken psychology and made it extremely practical. And he takes very complex ideas and thoughts and brings it down to everyday theory. And so one of the things that he said in a seminar, which I will never forget, our identity is the strongest force in the human personality. Think about that again, okay? Our identity is the strongest force in the human personality. I have analyzed this, thought about this, and it makes perfect sense to me. I see it as true. I have come to, after fighting it for so long, realize that this is an actual fact. This is something that can either make us or it can break us. There's nothing stronger in the human psyche than our subconscious need to align with what we identify as. So I'll give you an example. Who do you believe you are? Are you an optimist? Are you a pessimist? Are you depressed? Are you happy? Are you grateful? Are you helpful? Are you smart? Are you wise? Are you hardworking? Are you lazy? I'm giving you a lot of examples because I don't know where you are and what you're going through. You might connect to one of these, and you may have even said this out loud. Whatever we say after the phrase, I am, is now going to be a direction, a map, a navigation point for your mind to fulfill. You are going to find ways, excuses, reasons to meet that identity. What's the identity? I am a pessimist. I am an optimist. I am lazy. I am blah, blah, blah. So if this scenario for me is something that hits home all the time, because there was a real big point in my life where I realized I was doing this, and that is actually why I was never able to change this. What I'm talking about is, imagine you have an assignment, you have a project, you have something you need to work on. And for whatever reason, I kept pushing it off, pushing it off, pushing it off to the last moment. And then I'll get there and I'll start doing it. I'd finish it, but the next project, same thing. I have a lot of time to work on it, but I still hold off to the last minute, and then I do it again. In that moment, what I basically was telling myself was, hey, it's okay that you're doing this. Your behaviors, you're not a bad person. You're not making a lot of mistakes and stuff. You're just a procrastinator. And so in my mind now, just like ever since college, like, yeah, I'm just a procrastinator. I just procrastinate all the time. That's just who I am. That is just who I am. I'm not bad at getting things done. I'm just a procrastinator. The moment I say that, now every single behavior that is holding me back, I have just justified, because now I'm going to put everything into that box of, hey, what is an actual procrastinator like? What do they do? What are the things that they think? How do they behave? Okay, so now I can do that. I can do all those things because that is what I identify with. And if you don't consciously do that, your mind actually subconsciously does. Everything that we could see as behaviors that we might be able to improve, we don't let it because we hold ourselves back. Now, the brain has found every reason to rationalize why our shortcomings are justified. That is what happens when we identify with I am. And then the word we put after that, or the phrase we put after that, it's going to dictate a lot about our life. Think about what you say about your life right now. Think about the phrases you use. How are they? Are they empowering? Are they making excuses? Are they giving you the right to make excuses about your behavior? Are they actually giving you the strength to change, or are they giving you reasons to stay the same? It's something to really think about. It's the power of our thoughts. It really is. Now imagine if you had a bad relationship, a couple of bad relationships, you tried making it work and the other person just wasn't in, or the person cheated on you, or the person, was ghosting you, or just whatever. It just did not work out. And after a couple of these, what have I heard people say all the time? Guys, I'm just bad at relationships. I'm just bad at relationships. What does that mean? What do you mean you're bad at relationships? The moment you say, I am bad at relationships, you've closed the door on every single possible opportunity you had to make the relationship work or to do your best. Instead of realizing that, hey, this happens, it's the other person. It's two human beings that are trying to make it work. It's not just you. There's two completely different personalities, two different entire lives, thoughts, perspectives that you're trying to get along with each other. And so if in that moment it doesn't work, we can't put that blanket statement. I mean, you can. I would not want anyone to, because if you make that type of a statement, you've automatically put yourself into a box that is very limiting. And I would never want anyone to have to go through that. What we identify with can very easily be a crutch. Think about it. I asked earlier, what are the thoughts that you have about what are you? How are you? When you identify and say, imagine somebody who's trying to give up smoking. If they say, I haven't smoked in 10 days, they're keeping count, right? They're trying really hard to not smoke, but they haven't verbally said, I am not a smoker. Or someone trying to stop drinking. If they just say, sorry, I'm trying to stop drinking. I'm a month in, I've been clean for a month. That is not the same as saying, I'm not a drinker, or I don't drink. If you can just imagine yourself saying one of those phrases of something that you know is holding yourself back, and say it the other way, that I am not this. I am actually this. I am clean. I don't drink. I choose not to. That is far more empowering. And so I think the words that we use, we really, really should think about as often as we can. And so instead of taking ownership of our actions and responsibly making a positive change, if we identify with something that ends up being a crutch, it just is something that makes us feel good about ourselves. And it's something where we just think, oh, we're doing enough and we're good enough. And I'm telling you this from firsthand experience. I am not making any speculations or assumptions about what you're going through. I'm talking about what I went through and what I've been through. When I would make a blanket statement like that I am like this, I automatically was using that as a crutch to feel good about whatever situation I was in, that, hey, I don't actually need to change anything because I can't, because I'm a procrastinator. And that's basically what would happen. So there's one last thing I want to hit here. When I hear people, once this hit me and I realized that I was doing this to myself, I was constantly fulfilling my own view of who I am every time I was late, even though I thought I was actually trying. I was, but I didn't change my identity. I kept saying I'm a procrastinator and that I tried to get to places on time, but my body's going to do everything it can to align myself with what I identify as. So when I realized that, I realized I was holding myself back. So now whenever I hear people make these I am statements in conversation, just in passing with their friends or even online or on social media, it's just so quick. And they'll be like, oh, I'm not good at math, or I'm not good at public speaking, or I'm not good at relationships, or I'm forgetful, or I'm always late, or I'm a procrastinator. Whenever I hear that, I feel bad. I feel bad for them. One, because most people don't even realize that they're saying it as a crutch to feel good about themselves when it's actually not helping us be better. And two, it's actually holding them back from tapping into their potential, making their life so beautiful and enjoying their life to the fullest. That statement, when you quickly just put yourself into a box, it limits every single thing that you do from that moment forward. And I do not want anyone to have to feel that way. I know what it was like. It's so painful. It's self-sabotage, but we can get out of it. So look, when it comes to seeing faults in people, what are the confirmation biases that we have? What's the identity that we identify with? What's that claim that we make that makes us feel good? People saying things like, I'm just being practical, seeing the faults in someone. I'm just being practical. Hey, I'm being a realist, okay? I'm not going to be like an optimist here and just see that everything is just like beautiful roses and stuff. I'm being a realist. Actually, I'm just trying to help. I got to tell that person that they're screwing up, or tell you, hey, be careful, blah blah blah, and we'll come up with whatever story we need to by trying to figure out how am I actually being helpful in this situation. Or the best one, I'm just being honest. That's true. You are just being honest, but it's also BS. I am also being honest. I am trying to help. I am being a realist. I am being practical. These are all things I've said. And it's all BS. On the other side, I'm seeing it now that those are just excuses. 100% without a doubt is an excuse for myself to remain in the situation and position I'm in. And I'm saying this from firsthand experience. I know that whenever, even when I'm in a position where I'm handling a team or I'm responsible for somebody else or I'm managing someone, by me focusing on their bad qualities and rationalizing why it's okay for me to do this, I am making an excuse because it's easier to blame and point fingers. Why didn't this work out? It's because of this person. Why didn't this happen? Oh, it's because they screwed up. Why didn't this happen? Oh, well, if you have someone like this on the team, of course it's going to happen. It was always about putting blame elsewhere, and it wasn't about taking responsibility and seeing what I could do about it. If you think about it from a scientific perspective, our brain is extremely good at filtering out the information and the things that we don't need to think about, and only providing us with the things that we consider to be important, something that is important to whatever it is that we may want to do. So think about right now. This entire time you've been listening to this podcast, have you noticed the way your shirt feels on your skin? Have you noticed the way your toes are in your shoes or free on your carpet or in your sandals? Have you noticed that? The pressure on your butt if you're sitting right now, or your feet if you're standing right now? Have you noticed that? Have you actually thought about it? What about the sensation of your chest going up and down every time you take a breath? Obviously, you didn't. Your brain was filtering all of that out because that would be way too much sensory overload. That'd be way too much to think about. And instead, it just gives you what is most important. The things it brings to your attention are the things that we deem to be important. And we tell our mind what is important. How? By picking our identity. And that identity, what we identify as, is going to then drive so much of what we do. So if we identify as being happy, our brain is automatically going to start filtering the things out that could make you sad and help you see the things that will actually make you happy. If you identify as being a pessimist or someone who has a habit of complaining, your brain is going to find all the things that you could complain about and ignore the things that could actually make you happy. And think about a friend that you know that's in a place where they're just pointing blame at everyone. You could show them something they could literally be doing or thinking about that could make them feel better, but they'll avoid it because they're stuck in a pattern of thinking. If we develop a habit of seeing the bad in people, we will rationalize why those thoughts are justified. So here's a question, something for us to think about. What are the limiting beliefs that you've tied to your identity? Okay. What are these limiting beliefs that you've tied to your identity that is actually preventing you from being happy right now, in this moment? Is there something tied to this I am statement, I am like this, that your brain is now trying to find a way to fulfill? And because of that, you're ignoring real situations, facts, things that could actually make your life beautiful. Is there something like that? If we continue to justify our habit of seeing the bad in people, our brain will give you every single story in the world to make us think that we are doing the right thing. But we know we're not because we're not happy. We do everything we do in life to try to find a bit more happiness. And so if that thought process isn't bringing us happiness, clearly it's not the right thing. There was an example that my current spiritual teacher, his name is Mahant Swami, he gave in a lecture. He was talking about, imagine you're at the housewarming of your beautiful house that you spent 15 years designing, thinking about building, and now you got this beautiful home that you're about to open, and then live in for the rest of your life. You're like, this is the place that you always wanted to live. Found that plot of land, you built the house, and now you're there. And when you're there, you see an old friend from college who worked in the oil industry. And he comes up to you and he says, hey, I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for this house. I'm so happy for what you've accomplished and what you've built here. But I have something I wanted to tell you. I don't think you should move into this house. And you're like, what do you mean? Like 15 years of my life have gone into this. And he says, look, right now you see one house, but I can see 1,000 houses like this. I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, you're actually sitting on the top of an oil reservoir, a natural gas or an oil reservoir that's underneath your land, underneath your soil, that if you tap into it, not only will you be able to build another dream house like this, but you're able to build 1,000 more because of how much money you'll make from breaking this house down and tapping into all of that oil that's there. We think that we've done a beautiful job, which is good. We're confident. We take pride in where we are and how far we've come because we've probably been through a lot, and that's fine. But sometimes we might think that us building this life the way we have is perfect and it's the best possible thing. But if somebody else is coming and sharing that, hey, if you break this house down just a little bit and tap into a completely different resource, you'll be able to build a house even more beautiful than this. And if we choose not to break that house down at that time, then we're standing in our own way. We're getting in our own way because we're preventing ourselves from having more love, more beautiful moments, more joy. Because there is zero logical arguments that can stand their ground for why it's beneficial to a happy and prosperous life in seeing the faults of other people. So look, we've lived our lives according to our terms for as long as we have. Maybe ever since we got a little freedom from our parents, we're making decisions for ourselves. And you think, and I think sometimes, that I'm doing everything the best way that I possibly could, ignorantly not taking the consult of my parents who have lived many more years than I have, who could give me a lot of guidance to save me a lot of trouble. But we've lived still, in our minds, we've lived according to our own terms. And for years, we've always done things the way that we wanted to, thought about things the way we wanted to. And if we look at our life right now and it's not happy every moment of the day, if you're not going to sleep with a smile and you're not waking up with a smile, and during the day you're not having a smile throughout the day, then there's something that can be changed. Why not consider living according to the guidance of people that have come before us, that have found a way to live life in a much more beautiful state and found great levels of happiness? Why not try to live like that for at least a day or for a week or for a month and just give it a shot? What do we have to lose? We have nothing to lose. We just have to open our minds and give ourselves the opportunity of thinking of normal situations that we think about already from a different way. Maybe all we need is a better perspective, a better outlook, a new way to look at things. In the last episode, we ended with this one thought. I said, this is the action that we want to do for this week. Let's try to find and notice the moments in our day when we have a negative thought. Try to track it. I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to do that, but if you did, you probably noticed on day one, when you started noticing the negative thoughts that you had towards people or situations, by day 7, you had less. It's this thing that happens that when you're just aware of something and you start measuring it, automatically you start making adjustments. It's like the first time you look at your phone and you see how much time you've spent on your screen and you realize, oh my gosh, I spent 11 hours? No way. And you just think about it the next time you pull your phone up and next time you pull it out of your pocket. And you're going to think twice because you're now measuring. So I hope you had an opportunity to do that. So as we wrap up this episode, because there's so much more I want to talk about, and I have all of this lined up, I think that there's so much more we can dig into, but I think this is a really good place to start for what we're going to discuss next. But let's take a quick moment to practice. Do you remember in the last episode, we gave that story about, it was a real story. It was the story about that coconut tree that had no coconuts, right? Do you remember? So what was happening was there was this entire coconut farm and there was this coconut tree, the one coconut tree for 80 years that never gave any coconuts, but they always watered it. They always provided it all the nutrients that all the other trees got, but it never gave a coconut. Here's a practice right now. If you get a chance, you can DM me on Instagram. Go to Shambo, Shyambo. You can find me on YouTube if you're going to watch this there, and you can leave a comment there. Or in whatever way you want to, you can reach out somehow. You can send whatever you find in this as an answer. Let's practice seeing the good in something. There's an entire farm of coconut trees, an entire farm, okay? And there's one for 80 years that's not given one coconut. Can you, if you go back and listen to that story and what happened during that story, can you think of one reason why the farmer would keep that tree? Why would it continue to give it water? Why would he continue to feed it? Can you think of any reason why it would make sense for somebody to keep a tree in a coconut farm that's giving no coconuts? Can you think of it? Try to take some time and practice this. When you look at situations in your life, when you notice as you're measuring and you find a moment where you're judging something or someone or thinking something negative about somebody, in that moment, the best thing to do is to realize, hey, are you like the frog that's just ignoring that there could be a completely different reality? Are we being like the minister? We're just comparing to what we've experienced in the past. What is it that we're doing in this moment? Am I actually being arrogant? Am I not giving that person the benefit of the doubt? Could there be something about their character, about their life, about who they are right now that if I took a moment, I could actually think about and focus on and then leave with that thought instead of leaving with a negative one? Because we all know that negative thought and that negative feeling is not going to help. But I felt, what would be easy is starting with not people, but this incident. Why would the farmer keep a coconut tree that does not give any coconuts? Now, anything you say here can be true. Because if I asked you the opposite question and I said, what are all the reasons why it doesn't make any sense to keep a coconut tree? Whatever reason you gave will also be true. It'll be true for you, because whatever you commit to and whatever you live by, and you say, this is what it is, these are the reasons, that is what you're going to experience. That is how you're going to live. That is what you are going to feel. And so I think the most important thing about all of this is, if we, and I know we do, if we want to really find more joy, then what we choose to focus on, the thoughts that we choose to have, the identity that we create for ourselves, is exactly what's going to dictate how we're going to feel. And I don't want people unnecessarily to be feeling horrible if I can help. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. I've been gifted with these perspectives and these thoughts and a whole bunch of stuff that I'm going to share underneath about what if I'm focusing on the bad things about these people because I'm trying to protect myself so I don't get hurt again, because I don't want to be taken advantage of. Or what about the question, what about someone who's just out to get you? Why in the world would I ever want to see something good in them? There's so many questions that we're going to cover next that I want to really dive into. And for me to do that, I need to give us a moment to be able to sit back and think about what we just listened to. Think about the thoughts that we have. Think about what we identify as. Think about, are we being arrogant? Are we like the frog? Are we closing doors when we could be opening them? And the truth, the raw truth is, if we are not happy with the way that we're living our life and thinking about life, we are closing doors. We are making it harder for ourselves because we're just have that confirmation bias that this is a normal way of living and everyone's like this. Newsflash, everyone is not living miserably. Everyone is not looking at the faults of people. Everyone is not constantly blaming. Everyone is not constantly complaining. Everyone is not doing all the things that I used to do. And proof is, I'm not doing it. I can guarantee there's thousands and thousands and probably millions of people on this planet, of close to 8 billion people, that don't do it. So don't allow that confirmation bias to limit your potential of living a beautiful life. I hope this is something that you enjoyed, you're able to think about, you're able to really dive in and realize we can make our life beautiful right away. It is in our power, and it's not something to feel like you can't control. We're going to dive deeper and deeper into this, and I think the next section is my favorite. What if I can't find any good qualities in someone? I'll leave you with this cliffhanger. Martin Luther King asked a question. Why do people hate one another? What could cause someone to hate another person, to develop that type of horrible grudge where it becomes hatred? That's what we're going to cover starting in the next episode. And I am super, super, super excited to do it. And we're going to feel so empowered to be able to take life on with a completely different perspective. I really hope that this served you. I really hope that you benefit from this. And if you enjoyed this, please leave a review. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to the podcast, because honestly, that is the best way for me to be able to help and reach more people. If there are reviews and ratings on the podcast, and if you're subscribed, then that opens up many more doors for me to be able to get this podcast out to more people. And then we both could help more people. It's not just a me game here. I can only help so many people. But all of you decide to share this with anybody, post it on social media, talk about this with your friends, tell them to go follow or subscribe to the podcast or watch it on YouTube. You're helping them. And that's beautiful. And I think that is the best way that we can live life. In the joy of others lies our own. That is why I'm doing this. That's what my late guru used to say, and he lived by this. In the joy of others lies our own. In the progress of others lies our own. And in the good of others lies our own. When we can live our life this way, that is the key to happiness. that genuinely will bring us so much. And I'm really grateful for all of you for taking the time to be here. With that, I will see you next week. Take care. Bye.